Hello and welcome to Automotive EV Live. My name is Peter Wooding and thank you for joining us. Today is our finale session, really, our leaders panel. And I'm delighted today to be joined by Justin Benson from Vendigital, Emmanuel Arnaud from GEFCO, Sanjiv Takyar from CHEP, and last but by no means least, Karin Ebbinghaus from Elonroad. So without further ado, I will hand you over to Justin, who will also be moderating this session. And then we will go into our first presentation, well, our only presentation actually, from Karin. So Justin, I will hand over to you.
Okay, Peter.
Thank you.
I think it's we're going to introduce ourselves very shortly, but we'd like to kick off with a presentation from Karin in the first instance, who's going to talk about road charging systems and experiences from Sweden. I think that's right, Karin?
Yes, correct.
Very pleased for you to be here and crack on, and then we'll go from there. Thank you.
So thank you so much, Peter and Justin, for having me. Please, next slide. So each year, 4.2 million people die from air pollution. Cities around our world are heavily polluted by transportation. This needs to change. My name is Karin Ebbinghaus, and I'm the CEO of Elonroad, and we want to make change happen. We are all now facing challenging times. We are all affected by the pandemic and COVID-19, but hopefully we can find cures and solutions within short. However, we are all affected by climate change, which is one of the world's most pressing challenges. And we cannot lose focus on solutions and innovations that will enable us to find targets to reach the goals of the Paris Agreement. Next slide, please. In Sweden, where I'm situated, road transportation stands for 30% of all CO2 emissions. And the Swedish government has quite ambitious targets to reduce those by 70% by 2030 in order to comply with the Paris Agreement. And if we want to be able to reach that target, we need to remove our dependency upon fossil fuel vehicles. Electrification is one solution, especially here in Sweden, where we have access to a lot of renewable energy. But not all kinds of vehicles are suited to have heavy and large batteries. For example, a truck would need several tons of batteries to be able to drive a whole day, and that is not sustainable nor economically viable. There is a need for another solution. And think about it, why should you carry around all the energy you need to power a vehicle on board the vehicle? We don't have trains running on batteries, and the appliances in our households are rarely powered by batteries. We have constructed other, more efficient solutions. So why shouldn't this apply for the transportation sector as well? For our personal cars, batteries, of course, could be one solution, as we normally drive them during the day, and they can charge overnight. But when it comes to heavy transportation or commercial vehicles, it makes more sense to charge them while they are driving. Next slide, please. So we are a startup from Lund who have created a solution to enable unlimited reach on very small batteries. We have a system of dynamic charging, so you can charge both while you are driving as well as when you park. It's a conductive charging solution, meaning that there's a pickup mounted on the vehicle, and the pickup is in physical contact on the road when driving over it. There is an encrypted radio signal from the vehicle to be received by the smartness in the road, allowing the road to distribute power in very short segments of only 1 meter at a time. And the short power segment is unique for our solution and is the one that enables us to charge both while you are driving as being parked. Actually, when you park, all you have to do is drive over the rail, turn off the key, and parking will start automatically. Easy as that. The road can distribute 300 kilowatt, which makes a large truck use it both for driving, but also charge its batteries. So when it drives off the road, it can use the batteries as a road extension. The road has built-in high technology, such as sensors and wireless communication, and this will enable us to provide access control, payment solutions, and accident monitoring. We will have different sensors like temperature and radar, so the road will be able to communicate to the driver that in 1 kilometer there's a temperature drop, so beware. Or there's some wild animals. You know, here in Sweden we have moose running all over the streets, so drive carefully. So not only do we provide charging on the go, we also make the roads smart. Next slide, please. Electrical roads can be used for many different applications. It's a very inclusive infrastructure. So it can power large, heavy vehicles, as I mentioned before, such as used in mines or ports where it's otherwise difficult to electrify. And we do, in fact, have a pre-study in order to electrify big straddle carriers to lift containers. But it can also be used for passenger cars. If there were electrical roads in place in strategic places, cars would need so small batteries that they would be much cheaper to buy, thus enabling more people affording to buy EVs. Next slide, please. And we are a firm believer of the network effect. For example, our system is ideal to start with one stretch, perhaps powering a bus line, then adding on some additional road to enable perhaps last mile delivery. And we also have project together with DHL for terminal charging, but also be able to charge for the last mile. And in due course, when you need to, you have other stretches for your bus line, then you can just rebuild the area because the platform technology and the software is the same and will enable a seamless charging on the go. Next slide, please. And then as a company, we are also on an exciting journey. Dancy Trios, who is the founder, wanted to buy an electrical car but thought it was too expensive and the batteries didn't provide sufficient range. And as he was driving to work one day, he noted it was in winter, so there was a bit of a snow slush in the middle of the road. He thought, what if there was something there that I could use to charge my car, almost like my childhood car track. So he went home and built the first prototype in Lego. And then he found a professor at the Lund University, Mats Alakula, and together they developed the first prototype, but which we can now find as a large demo project here in Lund, where we have built our first stretch to demonstrate the operation of a bus line. Next, please. Unlimited range with small batteries is not science fiction or something that may happen in the future. It happens today. It works today. And Sweden has ambitious targets to reduce its carbon footprint by 2030 and has an ambitious rollout plan for electrical roads. And in fact, they are putting out a tender within short to build 30 kilometers of electrical road outside Stockholm. And they have also in pipeline to electrify the large highways between Malmö, Stockholm, Gothenburg, and back. And that almost is 1,600 kilometers, but it will only entail a cost of 20 million Swedish kroners, basically nothing when you compare it to euros, but it's less than 5% of what the same stretch in a high-speed train would cost. Of course, trains are an excellent way of traveling, but it cannot solve the challenges of road transportation alone. Our technology and solution is also something that is preparing us for the future. Today, we own our cars, we drive them during the day, and we can charge them during night. But when autonomous vehicles are rolled out, using our road to help them see around the corner, we will not need our own car. The same unit that will drive passengers during the day will also drive goods and parcels during night. We need to think how transportation is used, designed, and performed. We cannot just copy the infrastructure of the gasoline car into our future needs. We need to challenge our perception of today in order to prepare for tomorrow. Next, please. Due to the lockdown, the skies of Milano, one of Europe's most polluted cities, are now blue. Reducing or restricting transportation will not be beneficial for economical or global growth. So we really need to invest in new infrastructure that will enable us to minimize our carbon footprint, but also allowing us to keep on business as usual. Electrical roads can enable us to keep on moving, but without negatively affecting the climate. Electrical roads are ready to be implemented now. It has the potential to reduce our emissions with almost 1/3, which is most technologies. And that's why I a bit humbly sometimes call it a save the world technology. Please, next please. Our company is on a mission, so join us on the journey to a more sustainable future. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Karin. That was fascinating. It's an interesting technology that we've been talking about for some years. It's good to see it actually being implemented in parts of the world. And your photos of Milan will stay with me because I've seen similar ones for Delhi pre and post COVID, and it's they're very sobering pictures. And if there's anything we need as a part of Automotive EV and as part of hopefully the EV in automotive, or the wider aspects and infrastructure and so on with electric vehicles, it's a motivator to keep us going in that area. So thank you very much indeed. So what we'd like to do next, if we could just do some introductions of the rest of the panel, I'll include myself, and then we're going to get into a discussion and a debate. I understand the audience, everyone who's viewing and listening can ask questions. Hopefully through the discussion, we'll be answering a few of them in any event, but Peter might jump in from now and again just to raise a question for us if there's something burning coming from you guys out there, and we'll do our best to incorporate that in and answer those as well. So I think first then, Emmanuel, Sanjiv, Karin, I think you've probably introduced yourself. Is that fair enough? And then, so if I get Emmanuel, Sanjiv, and myself, we'll introduce ourselves, and then we'll get into the debate I think everybody wants to hear. So perhaps Emmanuel, would you like to go?
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Justin and Peter. Thank you very much, Karin, for the inspiring presentation. I can confirm also today in Paris is a very cloudy day, but we have no pollution for now, so it's cool to be there. I've been with GEFCO for the last 16 years. I'm responsible for the sales and marketing unit from the company. And I'm also a member of the board of directors of the company. And from that perspective, together with our CEO and the 4 other members of the board, we are paving the future of the company. And obviously engaging, as we are one of the leaders for the automotive logistics in Europe, engaging in the famous case destiny, connectivity, autonomy, shared mobility, and electrification of vehicles. And from that perspective, I will be pleased to debate with you this afternoon.
Great. Thanks, Emmanuel. Sanjiv? Can you?
Great. Yep. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Great.
All right. Yeah. Good afternoon, or morning, or evening, depending on where you are in the world. First of all, I hope you're all safe and well, adjusting to this new norm of working. So just a couple of minutes to introduce myself. My name is Sanjiv Takyar. I work for CHEP as the head of innovation, solutioning, and strategic marketing for the automotive business unit in Europe, and based here just in south of London. I've worked for CHEP now for just over 13 years, 9 years for the pallet business serving the FMCG sector, and then 4 years in automotive. And prior to CHEP, I worked in a number of businesses in product development and strategy, including 7 years in tier 1 suppliers. don't think I need to do too much of an introduction on CHEP, but just a quick reminder, we're one of the leading global equipment poolers. We've been serving the automotive industry since 1975, and we're owned by Brambles, who operate under two brands, CHEP and Kegstar. Kegstar is a relatively young business pooling beer kegs. So hopefully you'll start seeing, as the pubs reopen, you'll start seeing our brand on beer kegs. And we're operating in over 60 countries with around 350 million assets being managed through 750 service centers. So just very briefly, in terms of three initiatives that we're currently working on are, first of all, dangerous goods packaging. This is essentially the standardized packaging for lithium-ion batteries. Again, looking forward to receiving any questions or comments on that area. The second area is around supply chain visibility. This is called digitization or Industry 4.0. But really revolutionizing the industry in order to utilize track and trace technology and the data created from that through autonomous tracking solutions. And finally, the third area working on very closely now is around sustainability, which is obviously very close to our own value proposition, with three main focus areas around eliminating waste, eradicating empty transport miles, and cutting out inefficiency through smarter supply chains. So those are three big areas that I'm currently leading within the business in terms of setting the strategy for the future. And if anybody wants to discuss any of those topics with me, I look forward to receiving some questions, and obviously you can contact me after this session. Thank you.
That's great, Sanjiv. Thank you. It just gives us some real good clues on the sorts of questions we're going to ask shortly. Just very quickly, myself, Justin Benson, I'm head of automotive and mobility at Vendigital. We basically are experts in cost reduction and revenue enhancement in the automotive industry through the whole supply chain, whether you're a supplier, an OEM, or a retailer. And we spend a lot of time working with that entire supply chain to help prepare them for the new world I think we're moving into, not least electric vehicles. On that note, I think you've got a reasonably good view of who we are. I think, and I've got a few questions and thoughts, and I'd like to ask the panel the first question, which is, I think, business, because you've mentioned some of the things that you're doing, and it relates to a greater or lesser extent to automotive or to the wider infrastructure issues that we're all facing. But as we come out of COVID now, how are you seeing business get back to some sort of normality? Are you seeing the uptick? Is it going well, or are you seeing issues? What's the sort of things that you're seeing? Perhaps a couple of minutes from each of the panel there. Emmanuel, would you like to go first, perhaps?
Sure, thank you very much. I think this is really much depending on the industry that we are talking about. Probably there is a time lapse between the moment the lockdown has been ended, and it's not been simultaneous all over Europe, and certainly not all over the world. I was discussing yesterday with my colleagues in Argentina. We are still completely locked, and the factories are not planned to restart until the months of July or August for some of them. So that's going to be pretty difficult in the region over there. And hello, if anyone is listening from Argentina, keep some motivation around there. In Europe, probably it's a bit more mitigated. There are some now incentive towards greener vehicle, and then specifically in France for electrical vehicles. Not only in France, by the way. Certainly the Green Deal of the European Union is giving a push to every country to support the move towards greener transport means. And from that perspective, we see a change in the mix of what we are delivering. But really, the restart is not brutal, if I can say.
Right, I see. Interesting. That's really, I'll come back to the geographic issues shortly. Karin, how are you seeing this business? You're in a relatively new technology deployment area, but how's it going?
Well, we have a large project that we are working on. So for that perspective, it's quite okay for us. But we see that for new projects, the decisions will take longer to some extent because, I mean, all organizations are not used to working from home, and it has been more stressful. I would say that people are working more from home than they do in the office because it's more efficient. But I think, and I hope that the subsidies and the incentives from the European Union or others would go to green deals or green initiatives going forward. So the grants to save the economy or kick the economy will not be focused on the industry that has caused the climate crisis. And I think that's the signals we're getting, that all new initiatives are focused on green initiatives, and that is hopeful. But there will be a catch-22, I think, because a lot of customers that we are talking for, like the Swedish furniture company IKEA, they have made a promise to be carbon neutral by 2025 for all their transportation. And I think they will have difficulties getting vehicles enough that are EVs to support that. So it's a challenge.
Yes, that's interesting. Yeah. Perhaps touch on that as well. Sanjiv, you've got quite a lot on by the sound of it. It's interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And
what are you saying?
Well, I mean, clearly, it's been, I can only describe, I guess, the last 3 months as a roller coaster ride. And look, no one's got a crystal ball, and it's been obviously very difficult to sort of predict how things are going to progress. In terms of Europe, which is obviously where I predominantly work, I mean, what we are seeing is that some of the OEMs and the suppliers, associated suppliers, are ahead of where they thought they would be, and from their original predictions, and others are under. And overall, it's sort of weighing out to where we predicted. I think obviously what everyone is fearful of is a second wave and what that could predominantly do. But yeah, I mean, at the moment, it's press on, try and be as efficient as we can, because clearly with the supply chain sort of with the pause button pressed, getting everything back up and running is a big job. But I agree with some of the other comments made. I think.
Are you seeing a change in demand for your products? Is it moving to more sustainability?
Well, I mean, this was saying. I mean, in terms of the discussions now we're having now that everyone is sort of back and working, is a lot more emphasis on some of the initiatives that I described earlier. So clearly, in terms of how they can save capex investment, how they can become more efficient and more innovative, I think it has certainly brought that to the forefront. Look, supply chain is a word that is being used in the media and in the press every day, and I think this whole situation has really shown the importance of supply chain, and therefore, it's sort of gone up, I think, in the ranking of the world in terms of its importance. But I think people are now looking at more innovative ways of how they can make themselves more efficient.
Well, just taking that, I guess we've talked about how the business is going, but Emmanuel, I was just thinking about logistics, and albeit you've got some regions of the world are coming out of COVID at different paces, at different pace or with different sets of results. In the areas where you're seeing demand getting back to some sort of normality or increasing, what's the sort of changes that you're seeing as a logistics provider in the sense of the kind of services or discussions that you're having with your customers?
That's a very good question. I think on one side, everybody learned in the last 3 months to concentrate himself on the real essential. After the end of the lockdown, and you said it, people are returning to work progressively, probably not homogeneously, but they really concentrate on what is essential for the companies, and they're really pushing forward what is strategic. The capex is the dependency on cash, or the need for cash, is probably the trigger these days. Because remember that if you put a credit term on the invoices that we were due to do during the period of COVID, we would be cashing in now in June and July, and this revenue is missing. So probably that's now where the companies are under pressure. So this is an immediate trigger. The next one is probably seeing an acceleration of the moves that people were probably reluctant to do, whether it's to more sustainability. We also have a range of packaging product for automotive that we are running, and we see an increasing demand on that, just to continue probably increasing or decreasing the dependence to cardboard. At the same time, seeing the need for sharing the capex with people who are professional of that activities. And the last but not the least is the concern that people have to return to a normal supply chain. I think we've seen in the past months, 3 months, people running crazy after PPEs, masks, and so on. Now we have just to go back to the supply of parts and to decrease the stocks. This is really where we are. So whatever is normal is no longer routine, and we see a much more agile management of the supply chain. It's a big word, but really whatever was planned quarterly is now planned every week. And just to say, here in the team, I'm telling people, guys, when we make a decision, it's valid until it's no longer. So this is what we live, and this is the volatility that we have to face.
Yes, that's interesting. Yeah, because it's the agility is as a result of the volatility, isn't it? It's people are changing their minds. The consumer's behaviour is changing, so it's changing the way in which business is trying to respond to what everybody's trying to do as they come back to work and they get back to some sort of form of normality. I'd like to emphasise your geographic point, particularly for global automotive companies. The demand we've seen for, if you like, the traditional drivetrain type vehicles has increased quite, at least in certain areas. So geographically speaking, China and America demand has been increasing quite a lot. I was talking to a sports car manufacturer the other day, probably perhaps more towards the premium and luxury end, but nevertheless, things were going higher than they were forecasting a few weeks ago. So they were pretty pleased. I don't know whether you've seen in the auction market, for example, probably these aren't words that Karin might like to hear because it is the old kind of vehicles, I'm afraid. But the auction market, the demand has been very high. The prices for used vehicles seems to be at least getting back to normal, if not getting a bit higher before it levels out. And I mean, we're yet to see on new cars, but I have seen very anecdotally a number of dealers experiencing quite high demand. I mean, part of it is the fact that people are dealing with the sale of vehicles going back to March, of course, because that's a big month. And so there's a lot of vehicles being moved off the tarmac in late May and June. So, but that is also that there's been quite a few new orders coming in as well. So, I mean, as the audience might be aware, I'm ever the optimist, but certainly electric vehicles, perhaps getting back on message so far as the future is concerned, has been incredibly robust, and the growth levels that we were seeing in the first quarter seem to be getting back to that kind of level. And interestingly, commercial vehicles, I'm seeing more and more new models coming out which are electric. You know, maybe, Karin, your ideas are going to help the commercial vehicles be a little less weighty, because the big issue with these big lorries with the batteries is the weight and how much load you can then carry. So it'll be interesting to see how that technology develops over time, as people tend to prefer battery rather than the hybrids. Nevertheless, there is a place for both. Okay, so the next topic I thought would be useful, particularly with this audience, is the infrastructure topic. And I know it's a big subject, but thinking ahead a little bit around smart cities and thinking about the infrastructure issues that you're all facing in your own businesses, let alone probably on a wider geographic area. Just again, asking the whole panel, and perhaps Karin, we could start with you as your, is probably, there's a sort of a very futuristic view or of the future view of infrastructure. Is how are you seeing infrastructure changing in this new world to meet the demands of climate change and new regulation, etc.?
I can see it's a big confusion just for infrastructure, and I think it's sometimes when you look at the city, you have different actors and different municipalities and organizations within that, and you have the public transportation looking for their infrastructure, and then you have the commercial vehicles, and then you have the private cars, and everyone is looking for their own infrastructure solution. And for us, we want to address that in a more holistic way, to be able to have an infrastructure that all parties can share and use. So it will be more cheaper for each person to use it, as well as being able to decrease the size of batteries, because it's really there where we can see the both societal and economical gain to be able to have less batteries. So you can drive more goods or passenger, or just have a cheaper EV, because basically today the cost of batteries is almost half the cost of the car. So if we can reduce that, more people could afford to have EVs. So that is so I can see for a city, of course I'm speaking for my own product here, but to have an infrastructure that you could be several different vehicles to use, and not every different traditional actor is focusing on their own charging solution.
And how much of your job actually thinking about the city piece and getting to that a technology or an infrastructure that supports everyone?
Our target market is smart cities.
Okay. So how much of your time is spent working with the local government or the city mayor, if you like?
In Sweden, at least, the highways are owned by the government, but the roads in each city are governed by each municipality. So we are in discussions with several municipalities, because if they want to electrify their public transportation for buses, for example, they could use the infrastructure for the buses, but they could also use for other commercial vehicles used by the municipality, or service cars used for the elderly care or something. All kind of vehicles that need high uptime and high operation, that it costs money to stand still. They are benefiting from this kind of system. So we are in discussion, but still we have a demo project up and running in Lund. So it's our first, and hopefully within the next year we could have one or two more projects here in Sweden.
And are you seeing, I mean, Sweden's probably more positive, aren't they, towards this kind of technology, or to the sort of the electric world and climate change in many respects, in the sense of at least the take up of electric vehicles and so on. But are you finding the local authorities to be open to these conversations and open to change in that way?
Yes, I think that most organizations and cities are looking for something new and helping them, because infrastructure is a hurdle and it is restricting the rollout of EVs. So if we could have unlimited reach, that would be sort of gaining freedom for the drivers. But I can also see, like in Europe, in cities where you have trolley buses, you could charge from underneath rather than having those overline chargers, and the same infrastructure could be shared by many. So I think it's already there that you have electrical driven communication or transportation, but you can use it in a smart way.
Yes. Yeah, you're suggesting. Yes. So, sorry, Emmanuel, Sanjiv. So infrastructure, just to remind you, just thinking about the infrastructure issues that you're coming across, and also what you expect to see in the future. Perhaps Emmanuel, I'm thinking as well in the sense that the changes in your own infrastructure you've had to make, say, over the last year or two, in order to meet the demands and sustainable demands of the customers, etc.
Yeah, Justin, I think this is first maybe an initial comment. We were seeing already a trend coming of extra demand on the electric vehicle. And the forecasts were probably showing a change of the mix of the requests or the requirements from the customers who are more electric. And this trend, we have tried to adapt it and to bring it in-house just to make our infrastructure consistent with this need. We started plans in several places with proof of concept, just like in Switzerland, for instance, where we equipped our car compounds with electrical solar panel just to be able to generate more electricity in an area that is badly serviced by the local electrical infrastructure. And then we partner with the local electricity companies just to have the possibility on one side to charge electrical vehicle on our compound, and for the electricity that we were not using to feed it inside the network. And this has proven quite successful. And we have now replicated that in several places. At the same time, I was not an expert in electrical vehicle, but I learned quite a lot in the recent past. There are different technologies of chargers, different intensity of charge according to the batteries. I've learned plenty of things with the conference that you've been running. That one of the problems is to master or to improve the maximum, the capacity and the efficiency of the battery. So all that at the end is causing a need for versatility of the technologies that we are using. So pure charging, I don't know, Zoe from Renault or Tesla, or charging an electrical light commercial vehicle, you would not have the same plug, you would not have the same power, you would not have the same duration of charge. And we've had to equip our compounds with the most possible versatile chargers so that we are able to charge the maximum of diversity of vehicles transiting through our compounds. And if I were the mayor of a city, I would be very uncomfortable in seeing people coming with this or that brand of vehicle and not being able to charge them. So I guess they have exactly the same problem than what we do. We have started to see the same type of versatile chargers being installed by the municipality. We've also seen in the last 3 months smaller buses coming, electrical buses, full electrical, not hybrid, and this is reflecting, I think, a political willingness to make not only proof of concept but real life showcase to people that change, and this can be efficient because, as Karin said, you could probably recharge a car by night, but the bus cannot stop to recharge if you're inside. So technology is getting adapted, and we have to accept that there will probably be a different way of monitoring the productivity according to the capacity of this new type of engines. But at the end of the day, this is something that we have to go through, and we probably have to reset our own softwares, personal software, just to take it into account and to calculate differently the productivities.
Yes, yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, there's elements here of the different technologies. It's great thinking we can build infrastructure, but if you've got 50 different chargers for 50 different models of vehicle that you're actually running and doing, it can be a challenge. It's a real good example of the challenge on the ground. Sanjiv, just finally, a few minutes, if I may, so we could get some questions from the floor.
Yeah, so look, I mean, we've been looking at lots of things. I mean, obviously, say infrastructure is such a massive topic, but we've been doing some similar things. Like I said in my introduction, one of our biggest initiatives is around, eliminating waste. And a big focus on that, both externally in terms of what we do as a business, but also internally to do everything from, stop using paper cups and things in the office, and, discouraging, waste in the offices, through to utilizing, similar to what Emmanuel said, but we're utilizing our waste wood that comes from our pallets, broken pieces of wood, and putting generators inside our plants to basically run our plants, so that we're not using any renewable. We're using renewable energy to power our service centres. But the bigger picture here is very much around the infrastructure related to digitization, and what that can mean for the whole industry. So again, transport collaboration to eradicate empty miles. So we still have a very, very high percentage of trucks on the roads today that are empty. So effectively we're transporting air. So how we create an infrastructure around utilizing data, live data, to help redirect trucks to sort of pick up at multiple points to increase their usability and their capacity, which then has an ongoing effect in terms of improving efficiency, saving miles traveled, and then CO2. And we're partnering at the moment with a autonomous electric vehicle truck company in Sweden. Karin, you probably know who I'm talking about, but I can't say the name at the moment because we haven't officially announced it. But we're working closely with them to see how what they're working on and what we're working on sort of comes together in terms of achieving this future. So again, I think this is really important that we bring businesses together in forums like this or independent of this, so that we really understand how we can all point towards a common goal, because a lot of the initiatives we're working on, they do work very much in harmony.
Okay. Well, I think talking of bringing businesses together, which I completely agree with, I think the partnerships and collaboration we'll see a lot more of in these areas. Shall we ask Peter? Is there any questions from?
Yeah, we've quite a few. First one was I won't give everybody's family name, but Charlie, does the panel think that post-COVID there will be an even greater acceleration towards electrification, or will economic challenges prevail?
That's an interesting question. I could take far too long answering it myself. Perhaps, Karin, what are your thoughts, considering you're trying to get more of these on the road?
I'm trying to be optimistic. I think that it will partly be driven by capitalism forces to increase EVs, because you see a lot of customers requiring it. So it will really be making business sense to turn into EVs, both from a commercial and from a personal perspective.
Sanjiv, Emmanuel, any?
Yeah, I agree. I think there will be an increase, and I think it's predominantly down to the fact that we're obviously seeing a permanent change in terms of people traveling to offices is going to come considerably down. How they use a motor vehicle on a day-to-day basis, how many miles they travel. I think they're going to see that an EV, vehicle fits their lifestyle more than it did pre-COVID. That's my sort of opinion on it.
And just to acknowledge the economic question, I think you're right. There is a balance to be made in the sense of can people afford a relatively expensive electric vehicle? And the evidence at the moment suggests that there is still a lot of the diesel cars flying off the forecourts at the moment, vehicles anyway, and there will be, in commercial vehicle terms, what I believe to be a market for engines, traditional engines in the future. But it's I think it's what governments can do to help at this point, because if you look at what the French and German governments have done, they have announced recently support for electric vehicle buying by the consumer, quite significant. France increased their existing incentive. Germany's just increased that, and memory serves, they've also. I hesitate to call it a scrappage scheme, but I think it's more about how you can change your car for an electric vehicle. There is an incentive, but also an incentive to change your vehicle, or your petrol vehicle. So there is some real moves by some governments to really encourage it, and there are different drivers. But I think the European Union emissions standards are key to this, and they are low. All the OEMs are trying to meet those standards, and none of them, despite COVID, have said that we should delay or change those standards. So I call it a rush, but the move towards electric vehicles is definitely on the go, and there is a strong push from government. Just to mention the UK government, because wouldn't say they're a bad thing. They haven't announced any incentives. I think it's a difficult area in the UK, but I think what I'm hopeful of is that there will be some real support for the industry as a whole to move the industry as a whole in the UK to one which is much more sustainable, electric, if you will, and producing the sorts of products that we would like to see on the roads to help climate change. So hesitate on that. I think we were at the end of the 45 minutes. So
are we all right? How is everybody for 2 or 3 more, or do you want me to wrap up?
Okay.
Shoot.
Okay. This is really for you, Sanjiv, quickly, from Vivek. Sanjiv, I guess it's Einride, but really great to hear about it. But how do you feel about the EV market boom post-COVID? And Einride, by the way, are with us on a session next week.
Okay. Well, I mean, yeah, super excited by obviously, the EV boom, purely because, as well as obviously changing fundamentally, the products that the industry is going to be building, that obviously means changes throughout the whole industry, including the whole infrastructure, the factories, the supply chain. And with that comes the opportunity for change. I think we see on a day-to-day basis the amount of wastage that we have in terms of the way that the supply chain is specifically set up. And therefore, I think, the sooner that this can happen, the better for everyone, because I think we're going to become a lot more efficient in order to make the whole industry work more like clockwork. So for me, it's and for the business, it can't come soon enough.
Okay. Well, this one is quite interesting. Michael, I think this is more geared to you, Karin. Your infrastructure, is this kind of infrastructure for governments to roll out? Can it be a commercial venture, and can it be monetized?
Yes, good question. I mean, the first perception is perhaps it's for governments, but I can see that it could be for anyone, basically. If you have a terminal and you have a lot of trucks, which need to have high operation, or if you have a port or a mine, that's private enterprises. So anywhere where you have quite repetitive patterns of transportation and you need high uptime, having electrical road system is economically viable if you compare it to the amount of batteries that you can reduce and the time that you save. So it's, of course, for highways, it might be for governments or private consortium, because you will make a lot of money of charging for the energy that it will provide. So in the beginning, it's a bit the hen or the egg. Of course, there will be fewer users, but over time, where we see an increase of usage, it will be very profitable.
As we are over time, we probably should wind up, for want of a better word, even though we could probably go on for a lot longer. Thank you very much to you, Justin, Emmanuel, Sanjiv, and Karin. We've got a lot further things that we could talk about, but obviously we can't. But it would be good to see you all again, albeit virtually, until we can meet face to face, because the whole infrastructure and who does what and how, there's lots of discussion for it, and there's so many different opportunities. In fact, from one startup presentation we had yesterday, who are now offering a battery as a service opportunity, where they're much smaller and add together, which immediately to me, I thought, well, if that's the case, can they marry, for want of a better word, with a current EV with adjustments? Because that would remove the the range extenders having to be fuel driven, which then you would still have 100% pure EV, but you would have a top-up unit that was in your boot if you needed it. But I've now started talking, so I must stop. Thank you again. Thank you to all the viewers. And we have another couple of sessions coming up next week. I let one of them slip a while ago. But thank you. Thanks for your support. Keep safe.
Thanks for having us.
Let's talk again. Thank you. Thanks very much. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.